Well, this is a first on One Leg Up with Alex Garrett. I'm interviewing a president of the United States on his birthday. I mean, it looks like Abraham Lincoln, President Lincoln, has come back to life through Mr. Everyday Lincoln. Thanks for joining me today, Mr. President.
It is a pleasure to join you, Alex. As you know, well, you're right in D.C. and I was there last week, so
Well, I'll be
I'm
there
trying
in
to
March. I'm actually
remember.
reporting live from New York City. And do you know
Oh,
they have your
oh,
statue outside of the New York Historical Society? So I don't know if you knew that or not, but
I did not know that, but I must admit I get all the credit for having saved the Union. I mean, I like it's nice for them to be so kind and say, hey, we thank you for saving the Union. But really, there were a whole bunch of us that were saving the Union. But and so there's statues all over the place, and they're oftentimes of me. And anyway, I'm honored.
I'm sure many people would say if they would have a dinner with somebody, it would be Abraham Lincoln. So, have you gotten asked that question or actually gotten invited to have dinner with somebody as a lifelong dream?
I have, and so sometimes they'll offer to kind of help me get there, pay my travel, and since I'm kind of a fan of people, so for me it's it's fun. I love to go and meet people. Love to have dinners with people. It's a blast.
Oh my God, I gotta ask you so many questions. Tell me where you got the nickname Honest Abe, and when you first got it, were you honored by that name?
I was, I'm obviously, to be honest with you, I got a lot of credit for things that I'm not entirely sure were, I mean, I'm just a regular guy, a man with my foibles and everything. But one of the things that I really, what's the word, I really prided myself on was not cheating people and being honest with people and so that sort of there was a man who said something very interesting when I was running for president. He said Abe is as honest as the daylight. That's kind of a unique expression. I really appreciate that. I would like to think that I was that honest. But I think that part of what people were seeing was that I felt such a what's the word, a drive to be honest with my fellow man that I think it did show up in the way that people perceived me.
Well, in the movies that you were portrayed in, I mean, it looks like you were a really beloved guy dating back to Illinois. So the journey from Illinois to the White House, care to share about that for us who may not know the story?
So, of course, I was born in Kentucky and then moved to Indiana and then to Illinois. And so, but I ended up having all my family in Illinois, and I was married in Illinois and met my wife Mary in Illinois, and so I was there for years, and so I gave a little wow, like a 30-second 2-minute speech when I was leaving the depot in Illinois in Springfield on my way to Washington D.C. after I had won the election, and I said, hey, this is an emotional moment for me. I'm leaving this place that I'm not sure that I will ever come back to, a place where I was married and where I had my children and where one of my children is buried, and so that was the day that I left Springfield, and I was there in Springfield. I worked as an attorney. I worked before I became an attorney. It was a little bit of a miracle that I ever became an attorney. I ended up buying a handful of books, and of course I'd always been reading and reading and reading, and so reading was something that I could do. And so after I had been, one of the very first things that I did was buy a store, which promptly went broke and left me saddled with debts that I was still getting collections on when I was elected as president of the United States. I I owed money from that, and I think it's possible that some people would have said, hey, I'm not gonna, that was not my fault. I'm not gonna honor that debt. But I couldn't get myself to do that, and so I ended up paying that debt off for a long time. But anyway, so that was that was my first foray into business was as a store owner, and after that, I'd always done physical labor, but then I got into surveying, and my work as a surveyor was actually pretty good. I was because I was good at math, and because concepts and ideas were pretty good for me, easy for me. Those two things were kind of came together in surveying, and even today there are people who, I mean, the work that I did is still sitting there in Illinois, where I surveyed pieces of land, and
By the way,
there.
we're talking with Everyday Lincoln, and I got to ask you this. You are an everyday man when you were running for president, when you were in politics already. So, is that why you were able to be so popular and elected? Because you were that everyday person. And would you say in that time, everyday people got elected president, where today it seems like celebrity and, whatever establishment politics get you in? Back in the day, it was everyday, the everyman, right, that got elected.
What a delightful question, Alex. It, that's you could say that America is an everyday person's country, and theoretically, and you're right, it's not exactly that way today. I mean, I'm back from 1865, and I'm looking around, and most of the people that are in politics have been in for a long time, and they've acquired a lot of wealth while they've been in office, and so it's not exactly, I mean, like you say, it's not exactly an everyday man's world anymore to get elected into office, but it's not impossible. Everyday people still do get elected to office, and people who are everyday people who rise up to the ranks and acquire enough money to run for office, because it's in order to run for office, obviously, I mean, it takes a ton of money, but even if you get enough money so that you can buy the advertising, etc.,
Sure.
you still have to be able to undertake the whole thing, to manage that project on your own time. So you have to have gotten free to a certain degree. And but in theory, an everyday man can get himself financially free and run for office, and so I think that's a delightful thing.
All right, let me ask you this. You were the spearhead of the Reconstruction era, but I feel like you didn't see it, right? It was your time was cut short. If that day when you were assassinated did not happen, how would the country be now? I mean, it feels like, I hate to say your assassination changed the course of the country, but it did.
It did, but let me just throw this out. That it, when I was when the end of the war was coming, so we're talking, the 13th Amendment has been passed, and most people knew that it was over, and even the South was like, all right, it's almost over. But because I really felt like it was going to be a lot easier to be forgiving to the South than it was going to be to have roving bands of angry men running around shooting people. I called it the bloody work, and my hope was that the armies would go home to their shops and their farms and their families, and the only way to do that was to forego the revenge that the Northerners wanted. So many of the men in D.C. and in my cabinet and prominent Northern men were like, "Hey, hey, we need a little more, that this Lincoln guy's just a little too soft-hearted, a little too tender-hearted. That's not what this calls for now. Now we need to get a little more serious
I'm
and
so glad you mentioned that because you were known as the good guy. You were known as, you could get along with everybody. So how did you engineer abolition of slavery? Because there were obviously a lot of opponents to that. And I guess the North was saying, well, you're too soft on it. So how did you navigate all that?
I'm even though I'm not painted as a believer, I always really was. And there was a time in my 20s when I was kind of like really thinking about, and I would argue with Joshua Speed about whether there's a God or not. But in particular, as the years went by, I couldn't help but operate from the perspective that there is a God. And so let me just say this, that I think that God who created America and who did the miracles for Washington, to me, for Washington to have bullet holes through his clothes, but not through his body, was one of the many miracles of the creation of America. And I'm going back to your question now. So stay with me. So you were saying, hey, how did you get this 13th Amendment passed when there were so many people that were opponents to it? And so really, all the South had a desire to keep the institution of slavery intact. And the North, they were not really in favor of freeing blacks, and so it was just like you were saying a moment ago. There was a tremendous amount of resistance to this
You mean the South was not in favor of freeing the blacks? The North was already there.
The North was not really in favor of I mean, that's not exactly accurate because the abolitionists, the radicals as they were called, they were in favor of it, but they were I think they were the minority in the United States. And so there were other people who were like, I don't think the slavery is a very good thing. So they had different degrees of people who were willing to let go of it. But there were people in the North that owned slaves. The Supreme Court Chief Justice Roger Taney, the guy with the Dred Scott decision, he was a slave owner. I mean, and that's a little bit of a picture of what was happening all across America. Is you got people who were in this war with themselves to try and let go of slavery, and it was like heaven was pulling the slavery rug out from underneath America, and we were pulled into the freedom of the black man, kicking and screaming. We were at war
I feel
against
like
them.
you personally, do you feel like you were guided by God? I know you said you weren't really a believer, but you were. So do you feel like God engineered you not only through the war, Civil War, but also getting the 13th Amendment? Was he on your side with all of this?
I think so. I think so. Let me say that if the South hadn't been so effective, I mean, we had a lot more manpower, we had a lot more. We were the country that was recognized by the rest of the world, and so we were able to blockade the North, and so they didn't have the assets that they needed to really run a war against us, but we still couldn't beat them. And if the South had not lost Jackson, and the North didn't kill Jackson, it's almost symbolic that he was killed by his own soldiers. It was like God saying, "I'm taking him. He's done my work of making this job hard enough, long enough. Now I'm gonna give you guys a little bit of help." And that came along after a fast, like 2 days after the North had a fast of humiliation and prayer. And then was it Fredericksburg? That battle, and then it was a night raid that he was running, because he was going so many places so fast, his own men didn't know who he was and ended up killing him. Actually, he was shot a few times, lost an arm, and he got pneumonia, and then he died. His I hope I can say this without
Sure.
getting emotional, but his wife came to him when he was just about to die, but he couldn't let go, and she said, "Hey, John, I think of John Thomas Jackson. Did I get that right? Anyway, she said, if it was God's will for you for him to take you home, would you be okay with that?" He said, "I would prefer that." And a little after that, I think it was just right while she was there, then he transferred across the Great River. Anyway, but he was a super godly man. He was a powerful, terrible warrior, but everything he did was done with enormous prayer, and his regiments learned how to pray. He created these soldiers that were praying men thereafter. During the Civil War, there were I think it was 9 times. Maybe don't quote me on that, but the number of Bibles that were purchased during the Civil War went through the roof by both the North and the South. Both in my opinion, both of them were employed by God in order to bring about the freedom of the black man, and to create a what's the wording, a climate of freedom in America, because the blacks were the most mistreated, I would have to say, but anybody who wasn't popular amongst with their fellow men, they they were in jeopardy, and the states could claim, hey, states' rights. The federal government cannot force us to honor the Constitution. And there were people who were in the South who said that the Declaration of Independence, which said that all men are created equal, was a lie. So America was, in fact, I believed, and I said that within 10 years, Illinois will be a slave state. So not only there are those who still today say that the Civil War was fought over the expansion of slavery. And when I was elected, what I said was, hey, you can keep slavery, you can keep it going, you're okay with that, right where it exists, but nowhere else. And then of course, they were expanding into the territories. They were expanding over into Haiti and down into South America. Slavery was not on its way out. Many people still today say, "Oh, other countries got rid of slavery. You needed to get rid of slavery. If you'd have just waited, slavery would have gone away." But it didn't look like that to me. It looked like it was going just the opposite. From the time that America was at its institution, we had about a million slaves, and at the time of the Civil War, there was about 4 million slaves. So, in my opinion, it was increasing, not decreasing.
But yeah, I want to go back to what you said. So President Lincoln, you were okay with slavery, or had refine that with me a little bit.
So I was never okay with slavery. In fact, long ago, I said, if I ever get a chance to hit this, I will hit it hard. When the first time that I ever saw these people being sold as animals, I was just like, wow, that can't be right. And I said one time, I don't know when I didn't believe slavery was wrong, but I did not believe initially. I didn't believe there was a way to save slavery. I mean, save America, save the Constitution without leaving slavery in those little countries, the little states where it was, in the South, where it already existed. I mean, I believed, and I think the South believed this too, that when the rest of America became states that did not have slavery, that it would force slavery out. They wouldn't have the kind of representation that they had, because they had they had more representation because of the blacks than they really should have had. And so many of the presidents came from there. Buchanan, right before me, he was a Southern boy, and they were expanding. It was like we couldn't stop them. But if we'd have had all the rest of the United States as non-slave states, then I think that slavery would have been squeezed out. But even if it hadn't, at least the other states would have been free states. And so I really tackled this idea of becoming president and what to do about slavery from the perspective of, hey, we're just gonna make sure that slavery does not increase.
But then you end up ending it, and I'm sure that makes you feel really good.
Well, it's interesting. I said, hey, they're not going to go to war. If they go to war. These were my words. I said, war will be the overthrow of slavery. I just felt it in my bones. And interestingly enough,
Did you have friends or anybody on both sides? I mean, what was your connection to the soldiers that fought?
the soldiers the Northern soldiers.
And did you? I mean, on both sides, did you have connections on both sides, or were you mainly friends with the northern soldiers? That makes sense.
I did actually. I did. That's an interesting question, Alex, because you think about it. Kentucky was a slave state. Um, and I'm sure there were slaves in Indiana and Illinois was a Democrat state, which was and the Democrats were the ones that were really in favor of slavery. So all three of those states left me well connected to the slavery world, and my wife, she had fellow. Um, I mean, she had family members that fought for the Confederacy. Isn't that interesting? And in fact, there were people who said she is going to make him recall the Emancipation Proclamation. They thought, and in fact, on the day, January the 1st, 1863, when they knew that I had promised that the Emancipation Proclamation would become universal and that I would sign it, that they thought she's going to make him not sign it.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this, because I know this is fascinating, and we're going to break the fourth wall in a minute, because we have found Abraham Lincoln in a time capsule. He wakes up now in 2025, and from what I've seen on your Instagram, yes, President Abe Lincoln has an Instagram. Whenever I was going to say that, you have an Instagram. It seems like you're happy with who got elected in November. We'll go there, but also, are you happy with the general direction of the country? Meaning, when you had unfinished business, obviously you were assassinated, but at that moment you felt like you could take this country further, but you wake up out of this time capsule, and are you happy where the country has gone since you were president?
I am actually. I mean, some people would say, "Oh, there's all kinds of chaos. There's all kinds of problems." But in my opinion, that's part of life. Problems are always going to be, but I'm a bit inclined to think that there's some really good things happening. I'm excited to see that. One of the things that I really like is that America is still a republic, and it's we've had lots and lots of problems, lots and lots of wars, and yet I'm ecstatic with what I see. I am happy to see it still in existence.
And on your birthday, you are in the news because President Trump wants to stop making the penny, which bears your likeness. So what's that mean to you? I mean, is it may not be an insult to you because you want to see the economy prosper, but they're getting rid of the penny. They're getting rid of you, Abraham Lincoln.
That's another fun question, Alex. Thank you for bringing that up. The monarchies were the ones that like to put their pictures on their money, and I'm not sure that I would have put my picture. I'm not sure that Washington would have wanted his picture on the money. I don't suppose it's anything all that harmful, but anyway, I'm not too sad about losing my picture on the penny.
Well, we'll see how that translates and if it actually goes through. I gotta ask you this. First of all, if you don't mind, I'm gonna break the fourth wall here because people may be wondering who I'm talking to. I'm talking to Brian Jenkins. You are Everyday Lincoln, and Brian, I'm so glad that you're joining me. Why do this? I mean, you look just like Abraham Lincoln. Why continue his legacy? What did it mean to you to do this, to keep doing Abraham Lincoln and keep his legacy alive through you?
So back maybe 9 years ago when I was signing a petition. Well, we were getting signatures for a petition, and nobody was interested in listening to the importance of the petition. And it was our attempt at that time, and just in one little area to limit the power of government. And people were like, "Oh, I'm busy," and so I thought, "Hey, what if I painted on a beard?" And people were like, "You look exactly like Lincoln." And so then I started doing Lincoln presentations, and I'd wear the hat and everything, um, but
Where's
I
the
thought
hat? I
that
was looking for the hat, Brian. I'm looking for it.
right, right, and so um, I the information that I had run into in regards to Lincoln was Southern narrative. So even today, not just Southern, but the Northerners, many people in the North were not that happy with Lincoln. And but somebody said, if you're going to do Lincoln presentations, maybe I'll read a few more books on Lincoln. I hadn't read any books at that time. And then so I thought Lincoln was the president of Northern aggression, that he was the president that instituted the income tax and instituted the draft and suspended habeas corpus and enthroned corporatism and I was like I don't know that Lincoln's all that good of a guy. That he wasn't really Christian, that he didn't really like the blacks. Because while he was threading the needle and trying to help bring people who were were pro-slavery into the Union, it wasn't in the cards for him to say, "Hey, you pro-slavery people, y'all are bad. We're going to come and we're going to go to war with you." Because if he would have done that, then he would have lost Kentucky, and if he had lost Kentucky, then he'd have lost. Well, what he said, he says, if we lose Kentucky, then we may lose Tennessee, and if we lose Kentucky and Tennessee, there's a good chance we'll lose Maryland, and if we lose those three, he says the job is too large for us. He didn't think we could win, and so he had to gently hold these border states, and not just border states, but people throughout the United States who were barely on his side, who were willing to fight for the Union, but not for the black man. He had to keep them together long enough for them to start to say, "I think I do want the blacks to become free." And when the blacks started to get into the military, started to fight for their freedoms, it became almost impossible for people to say, "Okay, the black man's been fighting for the Union, fighting for America. Now we're going to put him back in his chains." That just became unreasonable in many people's minds. And so I can't remember if it was Walt Whitman who said these magical words. He said, 6 months ago, Americans were not ready for the Emancipation Proclamation, but now their eyes are washed clear by the blood of the fallen. Isn't that an interesting thing? And so America began to make this shift from we're going to save the Union to we're going to save the black man and the Union.
Let me ask you that, and that's really powerful. But let me ask you this: abolition doesn't happen. We're not looking at almost the 250th year of America. I mean, you probably put us on that course because next year is 250 years of America. You played a part in that, President Lincoln.
That's interesting. So let me ask. Let me answer. If people ask me, they would say, "Hey, who is a greater president or a greater man, Lincoln or Washington?" And I would certainly say Washington. I mean, Washington, what a godly man. I can't hardly make much of a claim to being a
Did he
godly
inspire
man.
you to run? I feel like the founding fathers inspired you and many others to run for president. Am I right?
That is correct, and many of us saw how these men rose up. They rose up to the challenge of the day, and fulfilled their duties with such courage and with such faith. And that was so inspiring to me and to many of us. And so, I mean, my upbringing was so rough that really getting connected to God was not that easy for me.
Hmm.
And I didn't feel like I really became a real that I really loved Jesus clear until 1863. Horace Greeley, the newspaper editor, he said, are you a Christian? And I said, you know, when my son died, I wasn't a Christian. When the war began, I wasn't a Christian. But when Gettysburg happened, I became a Christian. And I said, I love Jesus. And but this so I consider myself a little bit different.
We're gonna get to your address, by the way, because I want you to recite that in a minute. But before we get to that, um, you know, because you followed an Eliot time capsule through Brian Jenkins, you know there was an assassination against of President JFK, and they're releasing the files. And you know about the assassination attempts against President Trump. So, are there any files that maybe we should know about the Lincoln assassination that maybe people don't know? Maybe it's not just a situation with Wilkes Booth. Is there something there?
Each when I came in from Springfield, Illinois, to Washington D.C., the Pinkertons came to me. They said, "Hey, there's a plot against your life in Baltimore. So we're going to change the route to have you go not through Baltimore." And so we did. We went another way. And so those who I suppose were hoping that I would indeed get assassinated in Baltimore, they said, "Oh, look what a coward he is. He's running from he's acting like he's afraid of getting assassinated." And I suppose I had reason to worry about them being assassinated, as it certainly it bore out.
Mhm.
Um, but each year, well, every single time there was a new assassination plot uncovered, it was filed into a filing cabinet, and by the time my time was up, there were 80 of these assassination attempts that were all in this list. So in this file. So to me, it's not a surprise. I don't know exactly how come people are so resistant to the idea that there's a hidden hand at work. It's always much more effective to work as a hidden hand. A spy is a much more dangerous adversary than a man on the front lines holding his gun. A spy can do things that an infantryman with a gun can't do. And so spies, when they capture a spy, they don't hold him as a POW. He's executed, and because they are deadly. And in a similar vein, the hidden hand, it doesn't declare itself. It doesn't go and hold a gun, you know, and join the formal military. The hidden hand is working, and it declares one thing, but then it does another. And it's a much more effective tool in the hands of those who are in pursuit of a particular avenue. You don't tend to see, in my opinion, you don't tend to see that type of a procedure amongst what I might call the standard, you know, the people that are up front, the pillars of the community, maybe God tends to work more upfront, whereas the dark side tends to work a little bit well, with this nefarious say one thing and do
Sure.
another.
Are there any journals that document what you would have done if you had continued to live and were not assassinated, both as president and then afterlife? Like, did you have more aspirations beyond just freeing the slaves? What was next?
That's an interesting question because it was my hope, of course, that my southern brothers and sisters would get their rights back much more quickly. That that they would have their legislatures, and that they would become stable much more rapidly than they did. And I believe that if that had happened, and but by the way, because of what Grant and the other generals did, um, 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 that my idea, my hopes, my dreams for Reconstruction were actually started. They got underway, and the people that were really opposed to Reconstruction, who really were fighting against it, they arranged for my demise. And then there were some other elements as well. The money that during my time, America returned to a more of a constitutional type of money, because we were no longer having a private entity provide us with money. We were printing our own money, and people are like, oh, you can't do that. That's you're gonna debauch the money. But it turned out to be very, very effective. And the only difference between us printing our own money and getting it from somebody else who prints their own money is that whoever prints it gets the value of it. And so Americans get that money. We print it because it's us printing it. It's
So with this
you know,
knowledge, you must be really ticked that we keep printing money like it's nothing. I mean, I'm sure you're a little agitated having come from the time capsule and see how much we're spending here, Brian.
well, that's the thing that I do wish that was different, because having so when we don't really Americans don't really know who is getting the value of the creation of all this money, because all this money is created, and then it goes into the treasury, and then it goes in the hands of the Americans. It goes into the hands of it's spent. It's used. The government uses it, but the creator of that money is no longer us. And so when $1 trillion is created by us, then we become the owner of that $1 trillion. I mean, you can debauch that money, and that's an injury. But more injurious than that is to have these private entities that we don't know who they are become the recipients of the creation of this billion or $1 trillion.
Sure. All right. I want to ask you this. I want to have you back on for President's Day because we're getting into more about your connection with Washington and why the Lincoln Memorial is there. I want to get into that more. But on your birthday and on President Lincoln's birthday, let me say, can you recite the Gettysburg Address, even just first few verses, as if President Lincoln was telling us it again in 2025?
So obviously the delightful thing, the thing that I really, really wanted to convey, many of those things still apply to America today. But I was saying, hey, fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And so I really did hope that this freedom would remain. And I said, now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. And so I have to argue that America was much closer to its demise than people had any idea. We weren't going to long endure. I mean, New York City, not the state, New York City has said we're going to become our own country, not our own city. We're not going to join North or South. We're going to become our own country. And California, the state, said we're going to become our own country. We're not going to join North or the South. So the minute if the South had been successful in breaking away, there would have been no way to say where this would end. It would have certainly the South could have easily broken up into it could have easily broken up into 11 or so different countries, and America, many different countries, and many of them would have had or wouldn't have had slavery. It would have been it would have been the end of what I considered the the question of whether or not a country could rule itself. And so at the end, so in the middle of the Gettysburg Address, I said, it is for us to be here dedicated to the great work which they who have fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. And so they had done a great work. Now there's a whole bunch of people gathered for the Gettysburg dedication. So I was saying now we have a job. It's for us to be dedicated to the great cause, yeah.
Great cause. That's right. Yeah.
And then I go to the end of it, and I say, that this nation may have a new birth of freedom under God, that freedom, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And so I said from the earth, because I hoped that it would be that freedom could be something worldwide, not just in America. And if it could stay here, if we could keep our freedoms, then there was a chance that freedom would reach other people as well.
Would Abraham Lincoln be proud of you today, Brian Jenkins, for carrying on his legacy?
One of the things that he did that I think is really delightful, that he might be saying, all right, Brian, I think you're doing something you ought to be doing. And that is the principle. He wanted people to understand the principle of freedom in regards to the black man. And so there's a speech that he gave called the Lost Speech. And we don't know what he said in that speech, but we think that he said that he was talking about slavery in a way that a lot of people could not accept yet. And so he was saying, hey, I'm going to be straight up with you guys, but I would appreciate if you didn't say what's going to go on here today. And they said that he when he was talking about freedom, that his hair he'd have sweat on his hair, and his hair would be standing out in every direction, and he would almost glow.
You know, you were a great orator. Abe Lincoln was a great orator. That skill, I think you have to have some charisma to be president. But I feel like the tact that Abraham Lincoln had has been lost. Am I right?
I would say that it's such an unusual thing. So when I was in my 30s, James Shields made me really mad. And so I was not tactful. I started talking about things that I thought he was doing that I didn't like. And so I wrote in the newspapers and said what a bad guy this guy was. And so he challenged me to a duel. And we ended up going to Sunflower Island, and we had our swords, and we were gonna start cutting each other up. And I say this because the things that happened, that event and other events, made me look at tact in a little different way. Made me start looking at couldn't I be just a little bit more, maybe roughing people up is not, and being mean to them is not going to work. But so it was unusual in my day. I don't know of anybody else who really looked at this the way that I did, and I don't see too many too much of this tact. I would agree with you. I don't see too much of it today.
If you were to advise President Trump and even the presidents before him, because you were 16, now we're up to 47, which is 47, and I know a couple of them have been elected twice, Trump included. But 47 presidents is an achievement for a country that I still feel is still young. 250 years old is still pretty young. So if you were to advise all these presidents after you, what would your main message have been or is?
Well, there is a powerful argument that a nation cannot be free without God. Many of the founders believed that. They said, you know, the Constitution is only made for a moral people. And um, and the founders, I believe it's the signers, every single signer self-identified as a Christian. Now today we say, oh, they were deists, they weren't believers, but they self-identified as Christians. So I cannot help but think that faith and repentance and humility. Trump took a graze over his ear. He nicked his ear, and it was like heaven was saying, "Hey, you're in at my leave. You may look around and think that things are just happening, and that you're just lucky, but that's not so. It's not so. I'm the one who's I've created this world. I've created America. Do run this my way, or it'll be hell to pay."
Well, honest Abe Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States, through Brian Jenkins, thanks so much for joining me today on your birthday. How old would Abe Lincoln have been today?
So 209, I mean 1809 until 2025. What would that put him in? 216 years old, I think.
Something
So
like that. Yeah. Wow. 216 and 216 years later, here you are on the One Leg Up Network through Brian Jenkins. Thanks so much, President Lincoln.
well, Alex, God bless you, man. Thank you for letting me be on your show with you.
Everyday Lincoln, God bless you and happy birthday.
Thank you.